Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I will be talking about The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass on the original DS. And I did try playing this on my original DS, only to find that the screens on that system are really tiny. And because Link controls majorly with the touch control, like the bottom screen, the touch screen, I couldn't see a thing. I felt like my hand was covering up half of the screen, what was going on. I couldn't tell. So I thought I would put this in the 3DS and blow up the screen a little bit so I could see what was going on. And I thought originally of using my new 2DS, but I was kind of worried about ruining the touchscreen. For games like this, the original DS games, they were all about like scratching the screen, rubbing it. You really abuse that touchscreen, and I was worried about scratching up my new 2DS. So I recently fixed up my 3DS XL, and I figured I would use that, especially because the stylus on the 3DS XL is a lot longer than the new 2DS. I feel like the new 2DS stylus was only about 2 inches long. So I eventually played this on my 3DS XL, which I think was a good choice. I could see actually what was going on this screen a lot better than the 2DS. The screen is so much bigger. Unfortunately, this means that it looks not great blown up on a screen like that. Like, obviously, this game is going to be very pixelated. It's meant for the original DS. It doesn't look that great, but I can just chalk that up to, you know, it's a software of its time, and it's for hardware that is really old. So I can kind of pass what it looks like on the 3DS XL. I know what to expect going into this. So I talked a second earlier about the touch controls, and Link controls almost entirely using the touch controls. Where you tap on the screen is where Link is going to go. You can do a little slash move to have him do like this little cone damage, or you can jab at enemies and he'll do this kind of like little jump or this little poke with his sword. And then you can do little circles at the edges of the screen, and that's how you get Link to do his roll. And this never, I won't say this ever really felt good to use. I never thought like, hey, yeah, I'd rather do this touch control over the buttons. But I think by the end of it, it was tolerable. Like, you do get used to it. You can control Link okay with it, but if it came to this touch control or the buttons, I would prefer the buttons entirely. And then whenever it did have me use the touch controls to use items like the boomerang or to draw patterns, I think it should just freeze the gameplay and then you draw. But I guess this system works okay if you don't want that interruption in gameplay to draw on the touch screen. Now, besides controlling Link, there are some clever uses of the touchscreen in this game. For instance, like you'll be in a dungeon and there'll be a line of 5 switches, and it'll say, okay, this is the order you need to pull the switch. And then it lets you just drop down the map and draw and make any kinds of notes you want on the screen. Or say there's like a trap on the screen, you can mark the location of the trap. There are clever uses of this, and I really wish that there was some way to implement this into future Zelda games, of making little notes for yourself on the mini-map. I thought that was really fun, and when I returned to certain areas, you could see little notes like made to yourself from the past, it's really fun. Or there'll be like a certain pathway you have to go within all these pillars. You'll see like this map, and then you draw that pathway for yourself to navigate through later. So there are some clever uses. Let's see, there's like you have to draw certain patterns on the door using only one line to open the door. There's also like you have to write down a certain number, like write down how many palm trees were on the beach, and then you write down the number 7, and that opens up the door. It's kind of fun because it feels very personable. Granted, my handwriting really sucks on a touch screen, but it's just fun, you know, and it's not something that could be done any other way besides the touch controls. There are a couple other uses of the functions of the DS almost. It feels kind of forced, but you'll come across a windmill and it'll say, hey, blow into the mic to blow the windmill, which it feels gimmicky nowadays. It feels old, but at the time it was kind of like they were trying to find uses for the DS functions. There was one time where it actually has you close your DS to imprint the emblem of the sign onto your map. Fun little uses like that. There was a time when a guy says, hey, if you want this cannon, you gotta yell really loud that you want the cannon. And so if you're in public, you probably look really stupid, but you're like, I want the cannon. And I don't know if it was just looking for a noise or if you actually need to say it. It's probably just looking for a noise. I probably could have just clapped and he would have been like, okay, here's your cannon, good job. You know, it really feels gimmicky, but the certain like drawing on the map I really enjoyed. Other than that, the rest of it did feel a little bit gimmicky, but they did find clever uses to use the functions of the original DS. So the story takes place right after The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. So at the end of the Wind Waker, Link and Tetra, they set sail on the ocean with their crew of pirates. So this takes place after that. You're on the ship, you're in the ocean, you're exploring, and then a ghost ship comes. And Tetra gets captured by the ghost ship. So you're tasked with trying to find this ghost ship that has Tetra on it. You're trying to save Tetra. You fall off the pirate ship that you're on, and then you wake up on the beach, typical Link style, and you eventually come across a fairy named Seela, and this fairy looks very much like the fairy in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And then you come across this character named Linebeck, and he's kind of your typical Captain Jack Sparrow character, where he is very self-serving, but he also has a good core, you know, like he's a lovable scoundrel, if you will, very Han Solo-esque, where eventually he will serve the greater good, but on the surface he's very much like, I just want to get paid, I'm just in it for the treasure kind of character. So it's kind of fun having a character like that in a Legend of Zelda game. You eventually have to use his boat to navigate the oceans because you're trying to track down this ghost ship. And Linebeck heard that there's a lot of treasure on this ghost ship, so that's why he's in it. So you and Linebeck and Seela, you're off on this adventure, going across this ocean. It's kind of fun having a full-fledged game like this on the DS. So traveling works a little bit different on this game than you would expect on Wind Waker. You're on the ship and you draw a pathway for the boat to go to. So you'll draw a path from your boat to this island that you want to go to. And your boat will automatically follow that path. So you're not really steering the boat, it's just following along this path. And they do give you this cannon and some enemies to pop up, so you're kind of shooting at these enemies as you're traveling along this pathway. But I wonder if this was a limitation of hardware of the original DS that made you do this. I kind of prefer actually, you know, controlling the ship, and I can move around as I want to, but you kind of have to pause the screen, draw a new pathway if you change your mind or if you want to go a different direction. So I was kind of bummed out about that, and it takes a long time to go across the ocean this way. Eventually you do get ways to draw certain patterns, and then you can just teleport to a certain area, but that's not until later in the game. And I don't know, I wasn't too crazy about this. I kind of wish that maybe the ship moved faster or something, but I guess it just is what it is. At least it gives you stuff to shoot at and get rupees as you travel along the pathway. You can customize your ship. I feel like they are very stingy with their ship parts. There's a ton of different ship parts that you can acquire, but I feel like it's random for each playthrough. They do add a system for you to trade ship parts with other people, so I think that's how you are supposed to acquire a set. And as far as I know, the ship parts themselves don't do anything differently. Like if you get a different cannon, it shoots just like your base cannon does. When you do customize your ship, the guy who you talk to do it says if you acquire a whole set, it increases your ship's stamina. So I assume that means that it's hit points from enemies, but it doesn't make your ship go any faster or anything like that. It's, as far as I know, it's pretty much just changing the appearance. It doesn't really do any different functionality besides giving you more stamina if you have the whole set. There are a couple different things that you can collect throughout this game. Of course, every time you beat a boss, typical Legend of Zelda style, you do get another heart. You can also acquire these spirit gems, power gems, that kind of stuff. And if you have 10, then it can do a little bonus stat. I did acquire 10 power gems, which made my sword flaming, so I assume it did more damage, which was kind of cool. But it does give you a little something extra to shoot for. As far as dungeon items go, it didn't really do anything unique. Like I didn't acquire any dungeon item that was unique to this particular Legend of Zelda game. You know, you get your bombs and your bomb chews and your arrows. You get your grappling hook. Now, the grappling hook rope thing does actually do something unique to this game that I haven't seen in any other Legend of Zelda game, which I think would only really work using the touch controls, but you can kind of draw a pathway between two, like let's say you have two poles. You can draw a pathway between the two poles, and you'll use your rope to tie like a rope between the two, and you can have some fun functionality with that. Like you can use it to boomerang across, or you can like traverse across the rope. You know, it does kind of have some cool functionality that way. But as far as dungeon items go, I didn't see anything else really too unique. You know, you get the hammer, that kind of stuff. But each dungeon kind of, it's just typical Legend of Zelda dungeon, which, you know, the formula works, so why mess with what works? There's no map, no compass. There's just those little icing boing things as you hit them, and they say, hey, there's this many treasure chests on this floor. If you want me to reveal where the treasure chests are, give me 20 rupees. And usually you could just find them. They weren't too difficult to find all the treasure chests. You know, I might have missed one or two, but I feel like I completed each dungeon 100%. So you're going through this dungeon, eventually you get the item, you use the item to progress farther in the dungeon, you use the item to fight the boss, and then you get your heart, and then you leave the dungeon. It's very standard Legend of Zelda, what you would expect, which, you know, I'm not complaining, it works. As far as the aesthetic of each dungeon, they were pretty similar, and the music was the exact same music throughout every single dungeon, which was unfortunate. I would have liked a little bit more variety in that aspect. It feels like I was just navigating stone tombs every time. You know, there wasn't too much differing as far as aesthetics would go. That brings me to my biggest complaint about this game is there's a certain dungeon that you start out at. On the first island that Link wakes up at, there's an island of this of the Ocean King, and then it slowly like drains out life force out of you. So you use an item called the Phantom Hourglass, and that gives you a certain set amount of time to navigate throughout the dungeon before it starts draining the life out of you. And this dungeon is guarded by these phantoms. They are these invincible stone statue guys with swords, and if they see you and they get to you before you can get to a safe zone, they hit you and you lose time out of your Phantom Hourglass. And so it kind of plays like a stealth game. So you're trying to navigate through this dungeon, you're trying to avoid these phantoms, and you're trying to get these sea charts to reveal where you need to go next. And this is what I really, really don't like. So I never really liked that concept of trying to sneak around these phantoms. There's certain panels that make noise, so you have to move slowly on them, and you're trying to navigate as the time goes down. And unfortunately, you have to keep coming back to this dungeon and replaying the same parts each time you want to progress further and further. So every time you beat a boss in a normal dungeon, you get extra time in your Phantom Hourglass to go back to this base Ocean King dungeon, and you have to do the same thing. And it wouldn't be that big of a deal if all the keys had already unlocked all the doors, but you really have to go through and sneak and get the key and open the door again, and it really doesn't save your previous progress going down in this dungeon. You just have to play through it again. Now granted, as you unlock items, like let's say you have the arrow, you can do little tiny shortcuts, like you can shoot the eye switch, which will open up a door, and you can progress further. So there are little shortcuts to get you down into the dungeon quicker, but for the most part, you're just replaying the same dungeon over and over again, which it's not fun. It's no good. No Ganondorf in this one, which I thought was really interesting. The only other Legend of Zelda game that doesn't end with Ganondorf as the main boss would be Legend of Zelda Minish Cap. And but other than that, I was surprised that he didn't make an appearance in this one. I guess how the Wind Waker ended, it'd be kind of weird bringing him in this one again after how Wind Waker ended. I feel like they reuse a lot of Legend of Zelda sounds, like your little fairy that looks like the Ocarina of Time fairy. He would say, hey, listen, but it's not like super annoying like it was in Ocarina of Time, but it'll be like, hello, kind of thing. The music itself, it repeats a lot of songs from The Legend of Zelda. They really didn't do many unique music. They did kind of do their own spin of traversing across the ocean, but I kind of wish they repeated what they did with Wind Waker. I like that song a lot better. I'm really surprised that they had a full-fledged game like this on the DS. When I look at games on the 3DS, they are all mission-based for some reason. I'm thinking of like Triforce Heroes, Hey Pikmin, Federation Force. It seems like before I was chalking it up to, oh, they were doing these mission-based things because the hardware on the 3DS can't handle a full-fledged game. But this game did it fine. I think that Nintendo is just being lazy. They don't want to make full-fledged games on a portable system anymore. Granted, the 3DS is dead now, so that doesn't really matter. But it's just weird that they went to this mission-based formula. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon is another case of this, where they don't have just like a full mansion. It was just like, hey, go to this section of the mansion, and I don't know. I don't like the mission base. I like how they did it in this game. So now I can officially say I've beaten every single main Legend of Zelda game besides Spirit Tracks. And this game seems a lot easier and cheaper to find than Spirit Tracks. Every time I look in the used, like the eBay section, Spirit Tracks is selling for like $40, and it's pretty expensive. Whereas this game, the Phantom Hourglass, sells for a lot cheaper. And I hear Spirit Tracks is a lot better. So now I really, really want to play it. It's the only main Legend of Zelda game I haven't played yet. So I will definitely keep my eyes out for Spirit Tracks. So I know I've been harping on this game a lot. I have a lot of complaints about this game, but at the end of the day, it's just a normal Legend of Zelda game, and that works. And I had a really good time playing through it. You know, I was hearing all the Legend of Zelda sounds, the doo-doo-doo-doo. Anytime you solve a puzzle, it does that little puzzle jingle. It's just, it's very comfortable, and it brings me a lot of joy playing a full Legend of Zelda game that I've never played before. And I think I'm willing to write off a lot of the complaints. The biggest one is the reoccurring dungeon. I'm willing to write off most of that, because at the end of the day, I had fun playing a Legend of Zelda game that I've never played before. I think I will give this game a 4 out of 5. It was a great experience despite its flaws, and I just really want to play Spirit Tracks now. I just want more Legend of Zelda. The formula works. It's just a great franchise. Well, guys, that should be it for now. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about the Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass. I had a lot of fun playing through it, as I said, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye!